Lucas Jackson. Maliciously destroying municipal property while under the influence.
I was just passing time, Captain.
Cool Hand Luke showcased the life of a man imprisoned for a flimsy cause. While this movie captured the hearts of its audience with its deeply emotional theme, some lesser-known facts remain hidden. These behind-the-scenes or obscure moments add to the flavor of the eccentric movie. Eager to find them out? Join us as we reveal 15 weird facts you didn't know about Cool Hand Luke. Number 1. Paul Newman didn't eat 50 eggs, but he paid the price anyway. The 50 eggs scene from Cool Hand Luke might be one of the most bizarre and unforgettable feats ever put to film. Luke, determined to prove a point, bets he can eat 50 hard-boiled eggs in an hour. The scene plays out like a religious ritual, with Luke's bloated suffering resembling a kind of strange martyrdom. But despite the legend that has grown around it, Paul Newman didn't consume 50 eggs. He didn't even get close. Most sources indicate that he consumed approximately 8 to 10 eggs across multiple takes, which was more than enough to make him ill. What makes this fact so interesting isn't just that it wasn't real. It's that Newman wanted to go further but physically couldn't. The script called for intensity, and Newman gave it everything he had, stuffing eggs into his cheeks, lying on a table with his stomach distended, and sweating through a performance that looked convincingly painful. And it was. By the end of the day, Newman was reportedly so nauseated that he skipped dinner and spent the night groaning in his trailer. George Kennedy, who played Dragline, later said he could smell eggs every time he saw the film. But the discomfort paid off. The scene became iconic, not because it was real, but because it felt real. Every eye roll, every gasp, every swollen breath Luke takes is etched in cinematic memory. It's strange, absurd, almost biblical. And the fact that Newman suffered for it, even if he didn't make it to 50, only adds to the legend. In a film filled with metaphor, this scene may be the strangest of all. A man trying to prove nothing to win everything, one egg at a time. A performance so powerful, even the illusion left a bad taste in his mouth. Number 2. Don Pierce hated the movie the first time he saw it. For most writers, seeing their novel turned into a major motion picture is a dream come true. However, for Don Pierce, author of Cool Hand Luke, it was closer to a nightmare, at least at first. Pierce had spent time on a Florida chain gang, and his book was born out of first-hand experience. The heat, the monotony, the cruelty. It wasn't meant to be a story of hope. It was a gritty account of how institutions strip men down. So when he saw the 1967 film adaptation, he was stunned, and not in a good way. Pierce walked out of the premiere feeling betrayed. He thought the movie softened the reality of prison life. The characters were too clean. The guards were too polite. Even the chain gang work looked manageable compared to the hell he remembered. He famously called the film Hollywood's version of hell, a little sweaty, but with better lighting. The dramatized violence, the banter, the cinematic charm, it all felt false to him. Luke, in Pierce's eyes, was never meant to be a symbol. He was just a stubborn man in a system that didn't care if he lived or died. Over time, Pierce's stance softened, partially due to the film's wild success, and partially because it brought widespread attention to the brutality of chain gangs. Audiences, even if they didn't get the full picture, were at least talking about the system, and royalties didn't hurt either. Still, Pierce never fully embraced the film the way fans did. He remained outspoken about what was lost in translation. In his mind, the movie was entertaining, poetic, even beautiful, but it wasn't his story, not the way he lived it. And that always left a bitter aftertaste. So while the world felt the weight, the real icon says otherwise. Amusing, isn't it? Number 3. Newman's eyes were too blue for the camera. Paul Newman's piercing blue eyes were practically a co-star in every movie he made. In Cool Hand Luke, they're mesmerizing, calm, sad, defiant. But what most fans don't know is that those famous eyes nearly caused problems for the camera crew. Under the harsh California sun, Newman's eyes reflected so much natural light that early shots made them look unnaturally bright, even eerie. The film stock used at the time wasn't designed to handle that level of luminance, especially in close-ups, and the result looked more science fiction than Southern drama. Cinematographer Conrad Hall had to adjust his lighting techniques to balance Newman's features without overexposing his eyes. In some scenes, filters were used to tone down the intensity. In others, Hall altered the positioning of shadows or used diffuse reflectors to soften the glare. The irony was clear to everyone. The very thing that made Newman such a visual icon, those unforgettable eyes, was now the hardest thing to control on set. But rather than fight it, Hall eventually leaned into it. He began composing shots that used Newman's eyes as an emotional anchor. When Luke stares off in silence or locks eyes with the camera during a moment of rebellion, the brightness becomes a visual metaphor, hope shining in a hopeless place. The audience doesn't just watch Luke, they feel like they're looking into his soul. Still, for the technical crew, it was a daily challenge. Actors with duller features were easier to film, but Newman, with his striking features and luminous stare, demanded extra care. It's a small but strange footnote in the making of a classic that something as naturally beautiful as an actor's eye color nearly broke the camera's ability to capture the truth. And yet, in the end, those same eyes helped Cool Hand Luke become immortal. Number 4. The egg scene nearly caused a medical emergency for the crew. While much has been said about Paul Newman faking his way through the infamous egg-eating contest, the real chaos happened just off camera. During the now iconic scene where Luke eats 50 hard-boiled eggs in an hour, the production team used real eggs, lots of them. Crew members spent days boiling hundreds of eggs to use across multiple takes. And as the heat of the set mixed with the stench of sulfur, something bizarre started to happen. People began passing out. One assistant director reportedly collapsed during the first full take of the egg-eating scene, not from illness, but due to the overwhelming smell of rotting eggs mixed with heat, sweat, and body odor. The combination was so strong that several crew members had to wear masks or leave the set between takes just to catch fresh air. George Kennedy joked in interviews that the smell was so bad it could have woken the dead. The cinematographer Conrad Hall supposedly threw up in a trash can after filming one particularly sweaty close-up. To make things worse, the eggs had to be kept warm to avoid cracking from condensation under the lights, which only amplified the smell. Add in the fact that Newman had to stuff his mouth and cheeks repeatedly, sometimes gagging, and you had a recipe for disaster. Makeup artists had to blot his face and reapply sweat every few minutes, trying not to lose their lunch while doing it. Despite all this, the scene turned out brilliantly, and it remains one of the most unforgettable moments in the film. But the reality behind it wasn't triumph, it was near nausea. The crew still discussed it for years afterward. If the audience could smell what was happening just off screen, they might never eat another egg again. So yes, the eggs were fake in quantity, but the suffering was real. And it wasn't just Newman doing the hard work, it was the camera operators, the extras, the sound guy plugging his nose while catching every chew. Everyone walked away with a gag reflex and a story to tell. Number 5. The fictional prison farm was constructed specifically for the film. Although Cool Hand Luke is set in the hot, humid backroads of 1950 Florida, it was filmed primarily in Stockton, California, a location chosen for its visual versatility and production convenience. The prison camp that serves as the story's central location didn't exist before production. The filmmakers constructed it from scratch on a ranch outside Stockton, creating a fully functional prison set, complete with guard towers, dormitories, and a mess hall. The goal was to immerse the actors in an environment that felt both historically accurate and atmospherically oppressive. Wide-open fields represented the illusion of freedom, while the close quarters of the camp captured the daily claustrophobia and tension among inmates. The crew went to great lengths to make sure the location looked and felt authentic. Real dirt roads were carved out, props were aged and weathered, and set dressing replicated the Spartan, unforgiving world of a southern chain gang. Despite being filmed in California, the cinematography and production design effectively conveyed to viewers that they were in the sweltering South. The illusion was so convincing that many viewers never questioned its accuracy. Actors were kept in costume and immersed in the environment for extended periods, which helped their performances feel more grounded and naturalistic. Shooting in Stockton also allowed the filmmakers more flexibility with lighting and landscape shots, which they used to great emotional effect. Ultimately, the physical setting became an extension of the film's themes: beauty tainted by confinement, vastness without freedom, and a world where rules are more powerful than reason. Number 6. Drivers thought the prison camp was real. While still talking about the film set, the drivers thought it was real. More than once, locals pulled over to report what they thought were real inmates working in the sun under armed guard. One driver even tried to stop and offer water to the prisoners, only to be told by security that it was just a movie set. The realism was by design. Director Stuart Rosenberg insisted on authenticity. Actors were kept in costume between takes. Extras stayed in character, and everything, from the rust on the tools to the sweat on the men's backs, was meticulously engineered to feel believable. From a distance, it did. Passers-by saw shirtless men digging trenches while men with rifles paced behind them. It was a disturbing but all too familiar sight in mid-20th century America, especially for those who remembered the era of chain gangs in the South. Even more strangely, several local authorities were called during production by concerned citizens who believed inmates had escaped or that a working prison had opened nearby. Police had to reassure them it was just Hollywood at work. Some visitors even lingered to watch the filming, mesmerized by how real it all looked. The cast later joked that they could have pulled off a real escape scene, and no one would have known the difference. This strange intersection between illusion and reality made the film feel even more grounded. The prison camp wasn't just a backdrop, it was an integral part of the performance. And for a few days in Stockton, reality blurred with fiction, just enough to make people forget where the fence ended and the story began. Number 7. The famous line was almost delivered straight. What we've got here is failure to communicate. It's one of the most quoted lines in movie history. Chilling, ironic, and unforgettable. But it nearly came out all wrong. When screenwriter Frank Pearson first wrote the line, it was intended to be delivered with flat authority. Firm, commanding, like something barked by a general. But actor Strother Martin, who played the captain, had another idea. On the day of filming, he tried something odd. He pitched his voice higher, softened his tone, and added a slow, almost sermon-like rhythm. At first, the crew was unsure. Some thought it was too strange, too stylized. But director Stuart Rosenberg saw the brilliance immediately. Martin's delivery transformed the line from a blunt order into a chilling philosophy. The captain wasn't angry. He was disappointed, like a schoolteacher punishing a disobedient student. That soft voice made the violence that followed feel even colder. The decision turned the line into legend. Even more surprising is that Strother Martin wasn't a big-name actor at the time, yet his voice became the sound of institutional authority in a system built on control. His strange delivery gave the line a strange kind of poetry, something that stuck in your memory long after the scene ended. Number 8. The Plastic Jesus scene was pure emotion, not practice. The scene where Luke sings Plastic Jesus while strumming a banjo in the prison chapel is one of the most emotionally raw moments in the entire film. It comes right after Luke learns that his mother has died, a moment of loss and quiet reflection rather than explosive grief. What most people don't know is that Paul Newman wasn't a banjo player. He learned just enough chords the night before filming, and even then, he was nervous about performing it. The director, Stuart Rosenberg, decided not to over-rehearse the scene. He wanted it to feel spontaneous, fragile, and broken, just like Luke in that moment. Newman's voice cracks, his strumming falters, and there's an almost unbearable tension in the silence between lines. But all of it worked. His uncertainty, grief, and sarcasm all poured into the performance. What could have been a throwaway scene became a quiet masterpiece of vulnerability. Many viewers assumed it was rehearsed to perfection, but in reality, it was just Newman. raw and unguarded, barely holding the character together. That's why it hits so hard. It wasn't a slick Hollywood moment. It was a man in emotional freefall, trying to distract himself from a pain he couldn't talk about. The crew watched in silence, and some even admitted to tearing up behind the camera. Newman himself later said that Plastic Jesus became one of his most memorable moments on film, not because it was technically perfect, but because it was honest. The banjo stayed with him for years, and fans would often ask him to play it during interviews. He rarely did. That one scene had said enough. In a film full of rebellion, dirt, and sweat, this small, quiet performance reminded everyone, including the inmates around him, that even the toughest man has something sacred inside him that no system can reach. Number 9. The captain was inspired by a real man, but reinvented. Strother Martin's portrayal of the prison captain. In Cool Hand, Luke is legendary. Polished boots, reflective sunglasses, and that soft-spoken menace that somehow makes him scarier than a man with a whip. But what most fans don't know is that the character was only loosely based on a real person. Don Pierce, the author of the novel, actually served time on a Florida chain gang and had encountered a warden with similar authority. The real man, however, wasn't colorful. He didn't quote scripture or offer up eerie philosophies. He barely spoke at all. When it came time to write the script, screenwriter Frank Pearson knew that reality wouldn't cut it for film. They needed a villain who wasn't just mean, but symbolic, someone who embodied the cold indifference of a system built to break people. So the captain was born, a man who rarely raises his voice, but still makes your skin crawl. The mirrored sunglasses, which never reveal his eyes, were Rosenberg's idea. They became a visual metaphor for power that sees everything but reveals nothing. And Martin's odd clipped delivery of lines like, "What we've got here is failure to communicate," gave the character an eerie, almost spiritual authority, like a preacher who swapped the Bible for a baton. Despite his limited screen time, the captain became a figure audiences never forgot. He wasn't loud, but he lingered. And unlike other movie villains, he wasn't personally cruel. He was simply a vessel for a system that didn't need to justify itself. Pierce later said, "The real guards were worse, but less interesting." Strother Martin, meanwhile, would go on to be remembered for this role above all others, a performance that somehow made politeness terrifying. The strange thing is, the man he played never actually existed. At least not like that. But now, you can't think of chain gangs without picturing those glasses. Number 10. The famous quote, ranked 11th on the American Film Institute's list of top 100 movie quotes. Few lines in American cinema history have achieved the kind of lasting cultural impact as Cool Hand Luke's iconic phrase, "What we've got here is failure to communicate." Delivered by the film's prison captain, played by Strother Martin, this line occurs after Luke has attempted another escape and been brought back, bloodied, exhausted, but still defiant. On its surface, the line is a reprimand, a cold declaration from an authority figure asserting control. But beneath that, it encapsulates the heart of the film's message, the unbridgeable divide between individual freedom and systemic control. The delivery of the line is as memorable as the words themselves. It echoes throughout the film, literally and symbolically. The line has since been quoted, parodied, and referenced in everything from political speeches to pop culture. And in 2005, the American Film Institute ranked it 11th on their list of the 100 greatest movie quotes of all time. Its enduring popularity speaks to its thematic universality. It doesn't just apply to prisons, it applies to families, governments, institutions, anywhere people are silenced or misunderstood by those in power. The phrase embodies Luke's existential plight. He doesn't fit, not because he's evil or violent, but because his very essence resists control. In that resistance lies his tragedy and his triumph. In just 7 words, the line effectively captures the film's central tension and projects it onto the wider world. Number 11. Paul Newman nearly lost his eyes to dust on set. Filming in Stockton, California may have helped the crew mimic the look of Florida's sweltering chain gang camps, But it came with its dangers. Chief among them, dust. The film's outdoor scenes, especially those involving the prisoners working in open fields, required massive amounts of loose dirt to be stirred up for realism. Newman, committed as always, insisted on doing most of his scenes, even the grueling outdoor sequences. But during one of the chain gang shoots, a strong gust of wind blasted a mix of dirt and grit directly into his eyes. It wasn't a dramatic accident, it was simply a matter of bad timing and a very dusty location. The irritation was immediate and painful. Newman was forced to halt filming and consult an on-site medic. His eyes became bloodshot and swollen, and there were concerns that the dust may have scratched his corneas. For a few days, filming was paused or redirected to scenes he wasn't in while his eyes recovered. Crew members recall how he wore dark glasses and refused to complain, despite being clearly in pain. But don't forget, his famous piercing blues were also one of the film's most striking visual elements. Cinematographer Conrad Hall had already struggled to balance the lighting, because Newman's eyes were so bright they often overpowered scenes. Now, the dirt they were filming in had become a real threat. It's a strange, ironic detail. The star's most recognizable feature nearly derailed a movie about seeing the world with clarity and rebellion. Still, Newman finished the scene, came back strong, and never let it affect his performance. When people talk about the realism in Cool Hand Luke, they don't always realize just how physical it was. Dust wasn't just background, it was an obstacle, and Newman pushed through it, like Luke would have. Number 12. The movie was nearly called The Man with Nothing. Before Cool Hand, Luke became the title everyone knows. The film almost went in a direction that probably wouldn't have had the same impact. Early drafts of the screenplay and studio memos suggest that the producers floated alternate titles, including The Man with Nothing, Luke the Loser, and even The Last Rebel. All of them were designed to spell out the film's themes more obviously. Warner Brothers executives were reportedly concerned that the phrase Cool Hand Luke didn't make sense to audiences. After all, unless you played poker, the reference might fly right over your head. The now famous title comes from the scene where Luke wins a hand with nothing but bluff and nerve, prompting Dragline to call him Cool Hand Luke. It's metaphorical. Luke survives on spirit, not substance. But at the time, it seemed too subtle for studio marketing teams to grasp. They wanted something grittier, more tragic. The Man with Nothing was high on the list because it seemed to reflect Luke's emotional emptiness and self-destruction. But thankfully, director Stuart Rosenberg and the writers fought to keep the original title, arguing that it was the character. Luke didn't need to be explained. He just needed to exist. It was the right choice. Cool Hand Luke rolls off the tongue with mystery and swagger. It hints at calm under pressure, defiance without noise. Changing the title would have robbed the film of its identity. Over time, the name became a pop culture symbol, shorthand for anyone who refuses to be broken. Dragline's line, "He's got a cool hand, Luke," is now a permanent piece of American cinematic history. But it almost wasn't. The studio almost buried the myth in a title that told too much, but meant too little. Sometimes the coolest hand is the one that stays mysterious. He got arrested again mid-filming. In their quest for realism, the makers of Cool Hand Luke brought in a man who knew prison life firsthand, a former chain gang inmate whom Don Pierce personally recommended as a technical advisor. His job was to coach the actors on how to walk, talk, and behave like real convicts. He helped fine-tune the way prisoners held their shovels, the slang they used, and how they responded to guards. It gave the film that raw, believable texture that sets it apart from most sanitized Hollywood prison dramas. But there was one problem. Halfway through production, the ex-con vanished. The crew assumed he'd gone home or maybe taken another job. It wasn't until a few days later that word came back. He'd been arrested again, this time for stealing tools from a hardware store nearby. The man who was teaching the cast how to survive in prison had been unable to stay out of trouble in real life. There was no dramatic escape or scandal, just the strange poetry of a man being pulled back into the same system he had helped replicate on screen. The incident didn't stop production, but it became the talk of the set. It also deepened the cast's appreciation for the story they were telling. For Newman and Kennedy, it was a sobering reminder that the story wasn't fiction for everyone. Some men really couldn't break free, no matter how much they wanted to. That tension between myth and reality, between storytelling and truth, gave the film an edge that remains palpable today. It's one thing to act like a prisoner. It's another to realize the man showing you how may be headed back there himself. Life imitates art, sometimes with a bitter twist. Number 14. Paul Newman trained with inmates and got a nickname. In preparation for the role of Luke, Paul Newman didn't just read the script or rely on Pierce's novel. He visited real prison camps in the American South and spent time observing inmates in action. What's strange is how quickly he blended in. Despite his fame, the guards allowed him to walk among the prisoners during work hours, to study their body language and movements. Newman reportedly wore simple clothing, remained quiet, and kept his distance. But the prisoners soon noticed him, and instead of being starstruck, they gave him a nickname, Hollywood. They'd call out, "Hey Hollywood, you think you can shovel like we do?" Or, "Hollywood's too clean to be out here." It wasn't said in cruelty, it was a mix of curiosity and humor. Newman, for his part, laughed it off and took the ribbing in stride. He asked questions when allowed, observed the hierarchy of the yard, and learned more from a day in that sun-drenched camp than from any script notes. The nickname stuck for the duration of his visit. What's even more surreal is that Newman took some of those real interactions and folded them into Luke's quiet demeanor, his slight smirk, his refusal to bark back, his ease in silence. Although no footage of this prison immersion survives, several members of the crew confirmed its existence. It was an unusual choice for an actor of his stature, but it paid off. Luke didn't feel like a movie character. He felt like someone who could have walked right out of that chain gang and into the story. This confirmed Newman's humility and method. Not quite method acting in the traditional sense, but a deep respect for the world he was stepping into. The irony, of course, is that the real inmates instantly recognized him. They didn't see Luke, they saw Hollywood, and still treated him like one of their own, just with better shoes. Number 15. A Bible verse was cut for being too provocative. The film's deep spiritual undercurrent is undeniable. Luke's Christ-like suffering, his quiet communion with God in the abandoned chapel, and the constant struggle between grace and law. In an earlier version of the script, there was a planned scene where Luke carves a Bible verse into the wall of the prison barracks with a nail. Luke 23, verse 24. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The decision to have the character of Luke reference this specific verse was deliberate and chilling. It was meant to be written just after his second escape and beating. The scene was rehearsed and even shot, according to some production notes and crew interviews. Paul Newman reportedly spent time perfecting the carving movement, and Conrad Hall planned to light the verse with a single beam of light from a cracked ceiling vent. The shot would have framed the verse in a shaft of illumination, echoing a spiritual epiphany. It was powerful, too powerful. Studio executives feared the moment was too overtly religious, especially given the film's already pronounced Christian parallels. There were concerns about backlash from religious groups who might see the verse as disrespectful or too on the nose in the context of a convict character. So, at the last minute, the scene was cut. The footage has never surfaced, and no known stills exist, but several crew members have confirmed its existence in behind-the-scenes commentary. What's fascinating is that even without the verse, the film still pulses with spiritual tension. Luke's crucifix-like pose, his conversations with God, and his martyr-like ending all remain intact. But for a moment, the filmmakers almost made it explicit. Luke wasn't just a rebel, he was a redeemer. Had the verse remained, it might have altered the tone of the film, from less existential to more sacred. Or perhaps it would have marked Luke as a modern-day parable. Either way, it's a strange bit of lost film history. One verse, one nail, and a choice to let silence say it instead. Which of these facts shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.